simple self-defense that I can teach somebody in just a few classes is not that. It is, you get away from the hold. Most likely you're going to have to strike your attacker. And as far as the hospital is concerned, especially if it's a patient, there's a little bit more of a gray area when it comes to like family members and stuff like that. But if it's a patient and a nurse, a respiratory therapist, a physical therapist, whoever it is, if you strike a patient, they're going to fire you.
So the whole focus of this podcast, bullets to bedpans, it's a military nurses and a medic, but a lot of what we talk about crosses over onto the civilian side. When we were talking about workplace violence, I said, yeah, when we're deployed, we expect it. I mean, we expect that if a bombing happens or there's a sniper, I mean, we don't want it, but we know that shit happens. But when we're in garrison and we're back home, that's not the place we're expecting to have to dive under a stretcher or subdued somebody or whatnot. So this one's focused on the solution part, but a lot of it is just, we want your expertise. And since you have like 8,000 degrees in martial arts, I'm sure we can figure out some solution.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, that's really kind of where we're at. So I guess my first question is, what got you into nursing? Because we got to make the joke, right? Is the BNC is what we call it in the military, the Boys Nurse Corps, right? There's not a lot of male nurses. There's not. I mean, I appreciate them because holy shit, just put a whole bunch of females together, and I was a nurse manager, and it was the most stressful job of my life. Not because of the patients, because of freaking too many women together.
Absolutely. I always joked with my nurse manager. I asked her, I was like, hey, we've got enough guys on night shift now. I said, can you give us a week stretch once every 28 days of just all guys?
Seriously.
Because it'll make our life a whole lot easier. Because when they all get synced up, it can be a little cat scratchy.
A little? Oh my God. So I get it. So what made you decide, hey, let me join this group that is mostly women?
Well, from when I was like, started thinking like, hey, like, what do you want to do after high school and all that? The medical field and that side of stuff just always interested me. I actually started out thinking I wanted to go to pharmacy school. Not sure what changed my mind there. Thought about radiology for a while. My my instructor is actually a nurse as well. And he's not a lot older than me. He's 6 or 7 years older than I am. So I got to see, and hear like when he went through nursing school and then started working, as a nurse and stuff. And that kind of piqued my interest. And he was somebody that I looked up to and respected. So kind of just seeing, the path that he took, kind of piqued my interest in that. So I started looking more into it and then got to see, all the different avenues that I could take when it came to nursing, whether it was, nurse practitioner, which is where I'm at now. I originally was looking at CRNA school, but then I did the whole, got married, had kids thing. And that kind of shot CRNA school in the foot just because of the not being able to work for, like 3 years and stuff like that. So, but that's kind of what got me started was like I always had the interest in the medical field, and then just people that I knew, and then another guy that I train with that we tested for our black belts together. He's quite a bit older than me, but he's a nurse practitioner as well. So he at the time when I was looking at that, he was working as like a flight nurse and things like that. So it's like I had the interest in flight nursing. I'm too big to be a flight nurse, so that kind of got I'd have to lose 40 pounds to meet the upper weight limit with gear on.
Oh, yeah, you're on rotary wing, fixed wing. We take you.
Yeah, I'm 6'4", I weigh about 260 pounds. So
you be our bodyguard.
Yeah, so I was like, I'm more suited for that. Then I'll just keep my feet on the ground. But so that's kind of what got me into the nursing was the interest in the medical field, and then somebody that I really looked up to, respected.
Yeah.
kind of, he was, obviously, I mean, he's a big mentor of mine growing up, seeing him go into it, that just kind of sealed the decision.
All right, everybody. So again, we start with conversation because we always have great conversation, and everybody's probably like, "Who we talking to today?" And so everybody, bullets to bedpans back, and we've been doing a little series on workplace violence, and we wanted to continue that because we've talked about all the issues with it. We've gone through it a couple times, and we're like, "So what's the solution?" So I'm here with my interim co-host, Leslie Yancey. Hello, Leslie.
Hey, hey.
Hey, hey. And MZ's out for a little bit right now, so Leslie's filling in. And Leslie and I had this discussion about workplace violence, and I was like, we know there's a problem, and we know a little bit's being done, but what's the solutions? And then she smiles. She goes, like, I got a friend. And when Leslie says she got a friend, it's gonna be interesting. Oh,
Great friend.
you do have great friends. And so this friend is John Malone. John Malone's been a nurse for 15 years, a nurse practitioner for about a year, and he works in the CVT and he loves it. And on top of that, and this is where part of the solution comes in, he's a 6th degree black belt in the Chuck Norris system. I know there's a lot of jokes coming to your head right now. Keep them to yourself. He's a 3rd degree black belt in Krav Maga, and he is a blue belt in BJJ. And so he actually, and we're going to talk about this, he was like, I got a solution for you. And he wrote up something for his hospital. So, John, it's awesome to have you here.
Thank you.
So you joined the BNC, as we call it in the military. You took the leap. You came to the dark side with all of us nurses over here. And then 14 years in, you decided you had enough of just straight nursing, became a nurse practitioner. Where does the martial arts come in? Like, when did you start that?
I actually started karate in kindergarten the same year.
Oh, damn.
So, yeah, so I started like August of 1988. Ninja Turtles were huge. Karate Kid was huge.
That's how everybody starts. That's right.
Yeah, it really was. And, I told my parents that I wanted to do karate. They signed me up thinking it was going to last 6 months. And 35 years later, here I am still doing it, still teaching. And it's really something that I like, picked up well, really enjoyed. I tried other sports like school sports and stuff, and it just wasn't my thing. And this is kind of what I've stuck with over the years.
Wow. And for the audience, if you have never done any martial arts, my kids did a small amount of it. And I will tell you, that is dedication. So when you see somebody that's a 6th degree black belt, they weren't just sitting over there eating cereal, watching the world go by. I mean, that is dedication. So it's impressive. And now you can fuck a lot of people up. And now you're a nurse. And so now, how does that all come together? What happened to kind of lead you to go like, hey, we can do this better?
As far as like like becoming the nurse, like I said, my karate instructor is somebody that I really looked up to, respected. He was a nurse. He took that nursing route, and I kind of, followed in his footsteps with that.
Right.
And then
did you see a lot of workplace violence? Is it like, were you watching this, or was it happening?
I have seen, quite a bit. I've been involved with, several instances where I was called because they just needed, you know, male, help or reinforcement, like with, violent, whether it was like violent patients or sometimes even family members. I've been called to different areas. Typically, a lot of times I'd be called to the emergency room. That's probably where you're going to see the greatest part of it. I've never worked in the emergency room. I've always been in like critical care or intensive care areas. But I've been called to help in those areas. So I've seen that, whether it's been from patients that were under the influence of some type of substance, whether it's alcohol, drugs, whatever. Sometimes it was just patients that were, for, lack of a better term, they're just assholes, and they come to the hospital for help, but then they don't like what we're doing. Or it's family members that are upset because they don't think we're doing what we should be with patients. Or I've even had instances where patients have, passed, and it was a untimely or unforeseen circumstance, and getting upset, and then they kind of turn violent, or have threats of violence and stuff, has come about because of that. So those are the instances that I've seen. And like one of them has been recently within the last 6 months that we were having issues with a patient, and the nursing supervisor called and was like, "Hey, can you come here and just be a like a male presence and a large, because I'm a bigger guy."
I was
too,
like,
so
who's gonna pick a fight with you? First of all, I mean, you're what? You said 6'4", what? You're 6'4"?
6'4", 260 some pounds. So
and martial arts. I don't know who the hell would want to fuck around with you. So just your presence alone.
yeah.
And I saw it a lot in the pediatric world, which John's hospital doesn't have pediatrics, but I saw it a lot because you have the mixed dynamics as far as families, as far as, maybe a lot of co-parenting going on and a child ends up injured. And like John said, anytime a child gets sick or injured, there seems to be a lot of blame that goes around, or if you'd have done this, or they'd have been watching him. So I've seen a lot of workplace violence surrounding children.
Right.
And probably one of the most prominent, one of in my career was a set of twins that were born. One of the babies went for a procedure that should have been a very basic surgical procedure, routine surgical procedure, and one of the twins died. And the dad came back and he threatened all of us in the room that he was going to kill us all. And at that time, of course, we assumed, oh, it's just emotions, yada, yada, yada. They did put a security guard at the door. We, had to take care of, we actually left the body of the child all night long in the room, expecting him to calm down, come back, visit with the child. That didn't happen, but we always laugh about the security guards because, and I think it's different now. But they have no weapons. They look like they're 70 pounds soaking wet. Like they're not going to be able to do anything.
Or they're like 82 years old.
Yeah, right. But like I think 4 to 6 months later, that child ended up being like a CPS case, and they had to do home visits, and he actually murdered the social worker. So that person who threatened violence and threatened to kill all of us actually did murder the social worker about 6 to 8 months later.
Holy crap. I mean,
so we can't think that it's just empty threats.
We want to think the best, right? We want to think emotions take over. I mean, I've seen it too. I've been involved. I've seen it happen. Emotions take over, and they're crying. They're not thinking straight. They're just reacting. And we all want to believe that, but there's this risk that they can't recontain themselves, and shit like that happens, right? So again, John, you walk in a room and people are being asshats. I'm pretty sure when you walk in, that asshattery, if that's a word. It's a new word, asshattery.
I don't know, but I'm going to use it now.
It subsides when you walk in, right?
Sometimes it does. Sometimes they'll calm down a little bit, but then also too, there's this mentality, especially among guys, is like it's that prison, like that prison thing. It's like you got to pick the biggest and the toughest person and take him out. So sometimes it's like I could be standing there with 120-pound female, and like they're like, okay, I'm gonna attack somebody. I'm gonna pick because it's like, well, if I can take him out, then everybody else is gonna chill. So it's kind of like it's 50-50. It's like either I'm gonna come in and they're gonna calm down, or I'm gonna come in and it's like, all right, I'm gonna end up in a fight tonight.
All right, so I have to ask, what's the funniest or worst scenario that you've been in, or they could be together?
Probably the worst is the one that I just said that just happened probably within, it happened just a few months before I started the nurse prac job that I'm in now. And it had to do, we had a lady that came up. She was admitted to our ICU for a reason. She had two sons. One of them was an adult. They were both adult sons. One of them was either had some type of mental disability, or I want to say maybe he was like autistic, like, but very much so needed to be under the care of somebody.
Right.
She was not doing well. She was wanting the autistic son to stay with her, and we were like, that's not something that we can do. We're going to have to find somebody that can take him and come and get him, because it was looking very much like she was going to end up like on the ventilator, not be able to. And it's like, we can't be responsible for taking care of him because he's not a patient. So she was really upset. She was calling another son. He ended up coming in, and kind of caused a scene down the lobby with the security guards. And turns out he ended up having a gun on him. I guess, and he was on his way up to the unit. So it's kind of one of those ones we like skimmed by, like just by the skin of our teeth on him getting to our unit. But I guess he had put his hand into his pocket for whatever reason. And one of the security guards, we do have, talk about the security guards. Sometimes I look at them and I'm like, oh, when they show up, it's just not. This is like they're asking for oxygen for themselves when they run into a situation. Kind of stuff.
Than that.
or they look, like you said, they're 70 years old.
Yeah.
And but we do have a few that are like retired. Some of them are like maybe like retired, like military police, or retired police officers, state trooper, state police officers, that kind of deal. And those guys can, if they have the training and like the background, they're allowed to carry weapons now. I mean, so we do have a few security guards that like carry firearms and stuff like that. But I guess one of them kind of saw him reach into his pocket, didn't have a good feeling about it. They got hands on him real quick and then just held him till local PD came and took him away. So, that was like one that was like kind of close. And then
now he was the autistic child, and he had the gun.
He was not he was the older brother of the autistic son. And
so this was like the supposedly intact
normal
person.
one. Yeah. Like the one that was, I guess normal's not really the best term.
Don't even exist in the medical community. I gave up on that word.
But the one that, the one that was, would have been considered, like, have the ability to be the caregiver for this, for the other son. And then probably the funniest one was, this was a patient, dealing with a patient, was basically what we call social intubation. Comes in, he was strung out on something. The ER intubated him because he was just belligerent and they couldn't do anything with him. Cleared his system. He woke up, basically chewed through his ET tube. So we had to extubate him. And he's, screaming and hollering. He's wanting to get up. And it's like, I actually wasn't even working on my unit that night. I'd picked up overtime on another ICU and I was just coming over. I guess like my spider sense kind of tingled. So I was like, I'm going to go see what's going on over there.
Yeah, that's always the smart thing to do.
Yeah. Yes. I walked into this situation and they were like, we don't know what to do. So I asked him all the, who are you? Where are you? Who's the president? What year is it? And I was like, he's oriented. Let him sign out. And so he was threatening. He was telling me he was going to kick my ass and all this other stuff. So I was just, I told him, I'm like, I'm going to untie you, but you lay hands on anybody, myself or anybody else. I was like, it's not going to turn out well. And so I untied him and he goes to stand up. Turns out he had a history, had Huntington's disease. He looked like a newborn baby deer trying to walk around. Like he could barely get to the wheelchair. I'm like, and you're threatening to kick my ass? I'm like, how is this possible? I was like, you can barely walk, let alone. It's like, I just like push you back in the bed and problem solved. So that one was like, yeah, exactly. So I was kind of like, well, this like started out to be, I was like, okay, this could be bad. And then when he stood up, I was like, this is not an issue.
we had spoke before. I had a similar nurse that worked with us in critical care all the time. Big guy. We loved having him because he was always the enforcer if we needed somebody. But during one situation, we had a patient that had gotten violent with several females. He was extubated and the nurse had shoved him back into the bed, the male nurse. And we had all known that the patient had violent tendencies, all this, but someone from speech saw that nurse shove him back into the bed. She went straight to HR. She skipped the nurse manager. She didn't talk to anybody. She didn't understand what had gone on with that patient. Not only did he got fired, he lost his license.
Yeah.
So, like, where do you think, like, how do you think that it, anybody listening, you think, okay, well, I mean, I can't just let somebody beat up on me. So where is that line in the sand where we say be able to protect ourselves?
And that is where when you mentioned that I had written something up for my hospital, is actually the facility that I work for has a like an auxiliary like facility about 20 miles away. It's an ER is what it is. And they also there's some doctor's offices and some outpatient testing and stuff, but it's kind of like you can go there and then they can treat you just like an ER. But if it's something that's going to need admitting or whatever, they can take you up to the main campus or to another local hospital that's close if it's something that's beyond what they can do. But she also before she was the manager down there, she was the house supervisor, and she had come to me and said, hey, look, we've had a lot of issues with nurses being hurt by violent patients coming in. Can you come up with something for us? Hospitals use this program. It's called CPI. I don't remember what it stands for. I know the C, in my opinion, the C stands for crap, because that's really what it is. What they're teaching. Because I just recently had to go through this class just because of where I work at the hospital and stuff. I mean, and it's like, and they tell you this isn't self-defense. They're showing you what to do if somebody like grabs you by the neck or grabs you by the wrist and all this other stuff, and none of it would work. From my professional opinion, from a martial artist side, this stuff is not going to work. Like, if people try to use what they're showing you in this CPI,
you're gonna die.
You're just going to end up getting injured or worse.
Yeah.
But it's a hospital. It ends up. It all goes back to hospital liability.
Mm-hmm.
So am I correct in saying this, or maybe I'm assuming they don't really want you to defend yourself? They just want you to get out of the situation with minimal injury to everybody.
What I feel like it is they want to be able to say that we've given you training to protect yourself, and then they want to be able to, at the end of the day, say, oh, well, this nurse did what they should have, so we're not liable. It all boils back down to liability. So that line in the sand, it kind of comes down to the individual of, okay, what are you willing? For me, for me, I mean, it's different for me because, like, with my experience with martial arts and stuff, like, I would have no issue with somebody laying hands on me and me being able to, keep myself safe while, having minimal or no injury to the person that is, trying to hurt me, because it's like I've worked on, and I teach a lot of, like, control tactics and different things like that, to where it's like I can get somebody's hands off of me, control them in a safe manner until help gets there to either restrain them or whatever it is.
Right.
But that stuff takes years
to develop,
and hours and hours
Yeah.
of training and repetition to be able to do. Simple self-defense that I can teach somebody in just a few classes is not that. It is, you get away from the hold. Most likely you're going to have to strike your attacker. And as far as the hospital is concerned, especially if it's a patient, there's a little bit more of a gray area when it comes to, like, family members and stuff like that. But if it's a patient and a nurse, a respiratory therapist, a physical therapist, whoever it is, if you strike a patient, they're going to fire you.
Yeah, you're screwed.
And, then you're going to have to appeal to the board, to whether it's a nursing board or the respiratory board or whatever, when it comes to your license and stuff. But you have, but then it comes down to, it's like, okay, what's more important, my nursing license or, my overall general, health and well-being, which most people, I think, I would hope would choose, their well-being over something like that. So that's where that really fine line comes in, and it's a really blurred line in the sand, unfortunately.
Well, and then when things happen, like the person that Leslie knows.
Yeah.
But not only you're fired, you lost your license. So you just lost your career in one move, right? Like boom. And that
Right.
dude, from what we can tell, was subduing somebody that was violent towards females. He was protecting the staff. And however whatever they found out or didn't find out led
Mhm.
to him getting fired. So, I mean, it's such a pickle and we're already in enough pickles, right? I mean, after, and I don't want to get into this, but I'm just making a statement that after the big, what was it, LaDonda, the
Oh yeah.
Vanderbilt LVN, and that was a
Yeah.
whole freaking hot mess. And when they went and prosecuted, I mean, holy crap. So I'm just saying that we've got all these other things to think about to
Mhm.
protect ourselves and the patient. And we shouldn't have to be thinking about a family member losing their freaking cookies coming after us with a gun, a knife, or whatever. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Yeah.
I get it. I get things happen. And I think all of us, maybe I'm making an assumption, but all of us can kind of put in a proper place the person that has altered mental status from, like, I had one with a subdural hematoma. It kicked me in the face, right? Didn't know what she was doing.
Right.
We're trying to get her med. I was just in the wrong spot, the wrong time. I took it to the face. Got it. I'm not going to go attack her.
No.
If that whole scenario that you gave with the gun and the older brother, if that was the autistic kid, we'd have a different place to put that, right? Altered
Right.
mental state,
Right.
But when it
Yeah.
is peers, have you ever seen a peer-to-peer? Has that ever happened?
Yes.
Leslie's seen everything.
I've seen some verbal stuff.
Yes.
I've not seen anything physical between peers, but yeah.
Now, back in the day, that was another thing too. I feel like that we have became so soft that everything is.
Don't even get me started on that. Oh my God.
Listen, everything is, let's run straight to management, let's run straight to HR. And that was like the situation that I was talking about. If she'd have taken the correct and spoke to the chain of commands correctly,
Right.
but
Yeah.
she didn't. She saw a very small picture and did
Mhm.
not know the whole situation. And she went directly to HR downstairs, manager. And that to me, that was just,
It's egregious.
that
I mean,
person.
if that happened on the military side, they'd be slaughtered. Like,
Well,
you go
exactly.
up over your chain of command, like,
Yeah.
you're putting your life in your own hands just by doing that.
Yeah.
We don't do that. If you
Yes.
do, it's a death sentence. And the fact that the
Yes.
civilian side does not correct that, that's like also a
Yeah.
problem.
Well,
mean,
like she said too, we've become, so, just generally soft as a society. And it's like, even the way I treat my karate students now is so much different than the way I was able to. And I'm not saying I mistreat them, but it's, the harshness that I treat, my students with now. And it all boils down to discipline. Building respect and discipline is a huge part of martial arts. And you have to be able to do that. You have to have that discipline and that respect, for one, for you to be able to learn this stuff. And two, that's just an invaluable life skill that I'm seeing now personally, people coming that, new people, whether it doesn't matter if it's x-ray techs, respiratory therapists, nurses, anybody in the hospital. I mean, even like, dietary that deliver, patient trays, like there's not that discipline and that amount of respect that like we saw 5, 10, 15 years ago. And then the way that my instructors, my God, I thought my first 2 years of karate, I thought my parents signed me up for push-up lessons because I couldn't stand still or keep my mouth shut. Every time I turned around, I was being made to do push-ups. I thought that's what karate was for 2 years.
But you bring up a very good point, right? There is my son decided I'm joining football this year as a sophomore. I'm gonna tell you, where we live, they're starting that before they're out of the womb, right? So I'm all like, you're deciding now? Like, do you even know how to spell it? And so off he's going, football. And my husband went to the parent meeting, and my husband's played football and stuff. And so he comes back and he's smirking, and he said, the coach says, we're going to yell at your kids. Just telling you, we're going to yell at them. And he goes, our job is to break them down, build them up, break them down, build them up. And if you've never been in that environment, team sport, martial art, anything where it requires a discipline and you are there to be part of the greater good, like you don't necessarily get this, right? And I see that same thing, it's the butt hurt really quick, right? They're offended. So when there's verbal talk, and it must be hilarious in a hospital now because when I was in, it was straight talk. I mean, I didn't have time to say, now listen, intern, I know that you don't really understand that the baby's not quite positioned and getting no oxygen. I'm all like, move over. Like the baby's blue, like I'm fixing it, right? And we'll talk afterwards. Like I'm not mad at you, but I don't have time because if they go into, their blood pressure drops and then we're dealing with all that stuff, we got a problem, right? So
Right.
I wonder now, like you're in there, what do you see now? Like, what do you see the difference? Does it attribute to an increase in workplace violence? I don't know. I'm just spitballing.
I don't know that I don't know that it attributes to an increase in workplace violence because, like, I mean, I've on top of being a nurse and works as a nurse practitioner, it's like I've also taught for some nursing schools for some nursing programs. I've taught clinicals and things like that, and I see how it's just it really is. It's a generational thing to where, like, we said, that they're just the way, the societal norms and the way things are viewed in society affects, obviously how, kids are raised. And then when they get to, even into the college level, it's like even the way that these nursing students are treated now is not the way I was treated when I was in nursing school. And I wasn't in nursing school that long ago.
Yeah.
That it is just overall it's much softer. So, before I left the floor that I was on, I was one of the more experienced people. I was the person that's like, okay, hey, if something's going wrong, ask him or he's going to be there to help. But when I've got a patient whose blood pressure goes from normal to now it's, 50 over 30, like I'm not going to explain why you need to do what you're going to do.
Right.
I'm just going to say, I'm just going to tell you to go do this, and then they start asking questions and I'm like, don't ask questions. We'll talk after. But it's like they don't want, they want an explanation before they do it. And it's like, I can sit here and explain it to you, but your patient's going to croak before that happens. And then now their, feelings get hurt because, John was short and mean with him. And, my manager
pay the bills.
Absolutely. And luckily my manager knows, and she'll tell people, she'll be like, look, hey, if he hurts your feelings, it probably wasn't on purpose. Ask him about it later and he'll explain it. And that's what I tell people. I'm like, look, I'm going to probably come off, especially in an emergency situation, I'm going to come off as a jerk.
Right.
Plain and simple, because I'm just going to tell you what needs to be done, because really my only priority in an emergency situation is the patient.
Right.
Or if we're talking workplace violence, my only priority is keeping myself or my coworkers safe. The instance that I talked about, the patient that chewed through the ET tube that, that ended up, not really being able to walk that great after we got him up out of the bed. Like his primary nurse was like somebody that I'm still good friends with, but she was pregnant at the time. I pulled her back and pushed her out of the room and was like, I'll deal with this, because like it's one thing for somebody to accidentally get kicked or punched or on purpose, but I'm not going to let, a pregnant coworker put themselves in a place where they could get hit in the stomach, or whatever, and put not only them, but now put, a pregnancy at risk. But people don't, they're not accustomed to that type of, correction and that type of leadership where it's just like, do it and I'll explain it later. There's not always time for explanation.
Too focused on the shortage in healthcare, so that we are candy coating what the healthcare environment actually is. So everyone comes in with this unicorns and rainbows type picture of what healthcare is, and that's absolutely not what it is. It is a very, very tough environment. We're not preparing people for that environment.
Yeah, and then having people that are softer, that don't have the gumption to be able to stand up for themselves. I don't think having those softer people like increase workplace violence, but it allows workplace violence to creep in, because like with my patients, if I have a family member or I even have a patient that starts getting belligerent, I'm going to shut it down right there.
Right.
I have no problem telling somebody they have to leave. I have called
Absolutely.
security on multiple occasions to remove
Absolutely.
people. I called, not one of my prouder moments, but I called 911 myself on somebody one night because security was useless. They weren't leaving. So I just called 911. I mean,
Right.
and I was like, if you're not going to leave, I'm going to make you leave. I can't think of a single person that works on the floor that I just left back in March that would do that.
Right.
And it's like everybody is so afraid of confrontation and being
Yes.
viewed as the bad guy or being viewed as a jerk or being viewed as being a bitch or, you know, whatever it is. And I'm like, and I tell people with self-defense, I'm like, sometimes you have to be that person.
Yeah.
You know, if I'm teaching women self-defense and we're talking about, you know, unwanted approaches, you know, the first approach I don't consider that to be unwanted, because if a guy approaches a female for whatever reason,
Right.
you know, he doesn't know that she doesn't want to be approached. But once he's told no, anything beyond that is an unwanted approach.
Right.
You know? And the same thing goes for, you know, people in the hospital, like, oh, I got a cute nurse tonight. Okay. All right. Some girls may feed off of that. Okay. The majority of people, they may not say it out loud, but it's going to make them feel uncomfortable to take care of that person. Once you're told no, anything beyond that is unwanted. But going back to that softness, nobody wants to be like, well, I'm afraid they'll tell my manager that I wasn't nice. So
Exactly.
who
So
cares? Yeah.
let me ask, it just popped something in my head. And I don't know if this is still in existence, but there was a time where insurances or HMOs were sending, how was your experience? And they were
Yeah,
basing their how much they were paying the hospitals based on how hotelish, I guess, like their experience was,
And
how
yeah,
much they like. Does that still exist?
and your
that
pay raises.
Oh Jesus.
it's called they're called Press Ganey, which I think Press Ganey is like the
Yes.
company
Yes.
Yeah.
that does that. And that's where this is another
Satisfaction.
topic. This is another topic, but I'm gonna bring it up. But that's where those type of things is where we got into the opioid crisis, in my opinion, because they started basing patient satisfaction off of pain control. So then that's where you got doctors that would just write whatever, because people think I need to be pain free.
Yeah.
Well, you can't be pain free. You can be pain managed where it's tolerable, but you're never going to be pain free, especially after surgery or traumas. The same thing goes with patient satisfaction. You know, that's why I joke around. I tell people, I'm like, I don't wear my badge because I don't want people to know my name, because chances are they're going to have something bad to say about me more than something good to say.
You turn it
Because
over.
yeah, I keep it in my pocket. You know, because but the thing is, like, yeah, well, the thing is, all right, so I wear the shoes that I wear at work. I wear the Vibram, like the ones where they have like the toes in them. So yeah, Leslie's rolling her eyes. She knows.
Not wearing Crocs. You're not wearing the
No,
Crocs.
No.
I've got a joke about Crocs, but it's extremely inappropriate.
Go
But
for it. Go for it. Come
wearing
on.
Crocs is kind of like getting a blowjob from a dude. It feels good until you look down and realize you're gay.
And we are done for the day, folks.
Oh my gosh.
All right, back to your original thought.
Yeah, so it's still based on that, you know, and people don't want to have that negative review,
Right.
you know, and then hospitals obviously, you know, want those positive reviews. But the thing is what people don't understand, and it's the same thing with the compliment cards that they used to put on restaurant tables, like, how was your experience? Nobody reports the good.
Right.
You only hear about the bad. So if you have a hospital that's got you know, they're like, oh, hey, look, we brought in 1,000 Press Gainies last month and 900 of them were negative. Well, did we really only treat 1,000 patients last month?
So no, all the rest of them were okay.
People typically don't, because they're like, oh, well, if I don't tell them that there was anything wrong, they're going to assume that it's good, but they don't.
No.
And I've said for years as a joke, and it's the truth, the only question on a patient satisfaction survey for a hospital should be, did you die?
No, but there's truth in that. And I know people are like, why are they talking about this? And we're talking about workplace violence. Well, because what John said, you do not have people standing up for themselves because they're afraid that they're going to get a bad review or it's going to affect their pay. It's going to affect. So everything, it creeps in, right? So now
Yeah.
we're dealing, and then COVID just ripped the shit out of all of the medical community. And so now everybody's short staffed. And now you got people irritated. And now you got a staff that, if they're still doing press gaming, God, I hope that's gone away after COVID. Now you've got people that are afraid. How far can I go? Am I going to lose my job? Can I stand up for myself? So how does all of this translate to what you did for the hospital?
It's that it's going to be, it's a fine line that you have to walk. Like the proposal that I wrote up for the hospital, I tried to follow as closely. I was able to get my hands on one of the CPI books, and so I tried to follow as closely along the lines of CPI. And I mean, I even gave research articles and statistics about like health, like violence related to healthcare workers and things like that. So, and the proposal was basically shot down, didn't fall right in line with CPI, because CPI is what the hospital, that's what protects the hospital. Because like if I end up in a situation and a patient lays hands on me and I do something to defend myself, and let's say I do even if I do use the defense that CPI says, and the patient, because they've got balance issues or whatever, they trip and fall and hit their head, I can chart that, patient did this, I did this in return according to CPI, and that legally kind of covers the hospital because the CPI is the accepted.
What was your proposal on it?
It was basically providing training, but I think where I went wrong in my wording was I used the word self-defense, because the CPI class that I just went to back in May, they told us in there, they're like, this is not a self-defense class. Well, yeah, it is. Yeah, it is, because you're teaching me what to do if somebody grabs a hold of me. That's the basic definition of self-defense. But they kept saying, this isn't self-defense. This isn't self-defense. It boils down to wording, and it boils down to, hospital and corporate, or even corporation, not even just hospital, but just corporation, liability against somebody, that, wants to try to sue, and it's like everybody, everything is, people are so sue happy now that, it's, that it puts that fear in people, healthcare workers or whoever, that, all right, if I do something, somebody's going to try to sue me. And that's, another place that, training with self-defense, if you're training it, and I'm not putting a plug in for myself or just in general, it doesn't matter where you train. If they're not teaching you how to conduct yourself when you're explaining what happened, whether it is to law enforcement, to a judge, to a jury, if they're not telling you or teaching you or, guiding you on how to present what happened, then them teaching you the physical stuff doesn't do you any good.
Right.
Because, like you said, like Leslie said, the speech therapist, all she saw in her mind was that guy push that patient back in bed. She didn't see the number of times that he either hit or tried to hit that guy previous to this, or knowing that, okay, pushing the patient back on. And I mean, basic common sense, in my opinion, says that if a patient's trying to hurt me, what's the safer option for the patient? If I have to push away, do I push them into a hard floor or into a wall, or do I push them into a mattress bed? I can't tell you the number of times that I've pushed patients back into the bed that were about to fall, to keep them from falling into me. I pushed them back onto the bed.
Yep. And if that's all someone saw was just that little snippet, then of course,
and stuff like that can look bad.
Yeah.
I mean, it can look really bad when in reality it's not.
So my question on that situation, like, I've been running this through my head. I'm like, how in the heck does somebody do that? They push them in the bed for safety, to protect the staff, to protect himself, and to protect the patient. So everybody's kind of protected. Made the best move was push him into the bed. And then the speech therapist sees it on one snippet, and then goes and reports it. And all I can think of is that the hospital is like, oh, we're taking the safest route. Boom. I'm firing him.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
If you look at somebody like John, for instance, this is how my mind thinks. Now, I know John, and I have worked in that situation, but you think of someone who is someone like Speech, who maybe doesn't necessarily work to the same extent with critical patients that we do. You know, they get them after they've been extubated, that type
Right.
of thing. They're not really hands-on in the ER, that type of situation.
Right.
But hey, I know John is trained. I know that John has a 6th degree black belt. I know that maybe I don't like John's personality. Maybe I've heard John be a little too aggressive at times.
Never,
But
never.
no, but I'm just saying, you take that individual who is kind of removed from the situation most times, and I already know that John, I maybe don't really like John. And then I happen to see John shove a patient back in the bed. Oh, well, that is my time to report him because he is way too aggressive.
Well,
You know,
I can, and I say I get it because I don't get it, but I get what you're saying. And I get even where the hospital, if I'm walking through a thought process where they say, oh, okay, we're just going to cut our losses, like boom, fire them. What in the hell came up that makes the
I'll tell you what else happened. I'll tell you what else that just reminded me. She had also spoke to the family.
That's where it is, right?
And because of our patient satisfaction surveys, the hospital had to show discipline action was taken on this person, this nurse.
It probably goes back to that, like you were talking, that taking the safest route.
Yep.
I ended up with at another hospital that I worked at. It doesn't have to do with workplace violence, but there ended up being, it was a patient that I had taken care of. I had given report, had left. The incidents had happened probably 2.5, 3 hours after my shift was over, but it was involved with a patient getting a blood transfusion. And there was an error with that. And because there had been previous errors that were significant, like patients had died, like in previous months, getting wrong blood products because of a computer error with armbands, the hospital said, hey, if it's an error with blood, you automatically get this level of discipline, which is like the level right below being fired. And because my name was on the paperwork with another person, that person actually made the mistake, but they jumped straight to that. And I had worked at that hospital for 8 years with not so much as even a warning for being tardy or calling off.
That's what I'm saying.
Or
It's like
anything.
we jump so far. Like, I mean, the
And it boils back to liability. It boils
Yeah,
back
it's
to
just
liability
liability.
because had, the instance that happened, basically the patient got blood supposed to be transfused within 4 hours.
Right.
For whatever reason, it took like 6 for this patient to get this unit of blood. The nurse following me didn't stop it in time, but the patient was unharmed. But had something happened to the patient and legal action came back, they can say, well, those nurses have been dealt with because they received X number of, whatever discipline.
But how does the board like take? I mean, obviously we don't know all the intricate details, but how does the board say license gone permanently versus suspension with retraining, or something like that, right? Like where it's like there's no more middle step. It's like do or die.
Yeah, and that's like you said, without knowing the details of that, my guess is probably how it was reported to the board from the hospital. So like how the hospital dealt with it and how they reported it to the board. He may not have been given the option for any type of an appeal or to.
I think in his situation, what it was is he came up for renewal while this was in litigation, and his lawyer, it's like he couldn't renew his license while he was in litigation, I believe is how that went.
Gotcha.
And it was kind of like just because of the timeline, he ended up losing his license because of the way the lawsuit was drawn out. So, and at that point, I think he was just done. I mean, he had probably been a nurse at this point, probably 30 years. He was probably 15 years older than me. I would say 10 to 15 years. I mean, had always been a nurse, always worked critical care. We were absolutely devastated.
Yeah.
And and then the morale, what
Right.
it pretty much taught us as a team that, yeah, we had to just take whatever came at us, that we weren't able to defend ourselves because it's your job or defending yourself. That was the position we were put in.
I will say that any hospital, I mean, I worked military hospitals majority, right? And that's a different environment because we're not for profit. We're there to take care of our service members. So it does have a little different feel to it. And when I worked civilian, I think the first thing I noticed was how little control that I had over me. Like it was just, you're here. And this is from somebody that's in the military and we're all seen as assets and all that. And at the hospital, I was like, there's no regard. There's like no regard.
I also think to John's point, when he said that we're not teaching these younger generations, they just avoid confrontation. They don't take control of a situation from the jump. So, like, for instance, if I was going in to deep suction a baby, okay, you would have parents who would just lose their minds because it is in ways a violent procedure.
Very traumatic. Yes.
Yeah.
So, but right off the bat, I would say, hey, if you don't mind, could you please step out in the hallway while I take care of this? And as soon as I'm done, you can come right back in. That went over so much better than the mom screaming, crying in the corner. Oh, my poor baby. The baby got more upset because the mom was upset.
Right.
But I went ahead and I took control of that situation from the beginning, asked those parents to step out. The kid was fine. You didn't injure the kid. Maybe you'd bust a nose every once in a while, but it was something that I was trained to do.
You need to clarify on bust a nose there, Leslie.
Well, when you're deep suctioning a child and they toss their heads back and forth, their nose is dry from the virus. Normally,
she's not in there. She's not in there punching infants.
no, I wasn't punching.
Hold still.
But you had to have control over that child.
Right.
You had to restrain that child because getting rid of that mucus, like with RSV, for example, that prevented that child from going on mechanical ventilation.
Exactly. Well, and I think
had to be done.
all of us probably learned, well, we all learned, we have a very, very romantic view when we start in our careers, right?
Yeah.
We all do, right? I'm going to save the world. And then there's a point, and it's probably right in nursing school, where you realize that we have to, for lack of better terms, we have to hurt to help. Starting the IV, dropping the NG tube, putting in the chest tube, whatever it is, we kind of have to cause pain in order to make a recovery. And so that's a hard concept really to get your head wrapped around. And so it's traumatic. So, I know that's a little digressing, but when we're bringing this all the way back to workplace violence, these are all these factors that are cumulatively coming together. So our maybe not inability, but less training in setting boundaries, less training in how to identify a person that could be an issue and nipping it in the bud early on. So we don't ever get to that point. And where some of that comes from is building trust. I've had patients that, they're stressed out and there would be the baby struggling, like, I was doing labor and delivery in utero and everybody's stressed out. And if they had trust in me and they had trust in the team, then they fared way better. And now we're in a scenario where we're short-staffed, significantly short-staffed, and we're zooming in and out of things. We know what we're doing, right? In the hospital, we know, like, I did this, I did that. We're probably just running checklists more than anything, trying to keep up with everything. And where's the trust being built? When we're not building trust, I definitely know we're going to have an increased risk of workplace violence.
Right.
And now we're put in a scenario where we're short-staffed, where it's giving us limited time with the patients. and we're not maybe able to build that trust as much, it's a big vicious cycle. Add into all the other stuff we talked about today, which we talked about all kinds of things that can influence it. And then, John, you put the cherry on the cake here when you're like, I had a plan, and it was to teach self-defense in a way that protects the patient and the staff member in a way to get them out of the scenario and hopefully minimally injure everybody. And the hospital's like, yeah, no, that's really doing stuff. We're just gonna do our nice little,
Way too
shade
much,
over
John.
here. Yeah, I don't,
Way
and
too
that
much.
costs money. And if we have to actually do stuff, yeah, that could cut into our profits. Or as we know, hospitals are not making tons of money right now. It's cutting into our bottom line that we may not have much room for right there. So again, it breaks my heart to say we've had 3 different conversations, right? And this third one with somebody that says, hey, I'm an expert in self-defense. I'm an expert in how to subdue somebody without a sleeper hold. I'm an expert in all these things, and we still can't come up with a solution. And so I'm like, my God, where is it going to be? I mean, I hope administration, somebody hears our little podcast and is like, ew, because it doesn't look good. Doesn't
No.
sound good. And you're all having a staffing issue as it is. How in the hell are we supposed to keep staff when you're treated as some kind of third-class citizen and you come behind everything? Yeah, you're the one that's the foundation. I mean,
But we get pizza parties. So
ice cream socials.
yeah.
So administration, get in touch. Like, wake up, go see John. He obviously has a game plan. He's obviously an expert. And you can offer training. Do you offer this? Do you offer classes for medical people? Like, do you offer that on the
I
outside?
don't. I mean, I don't offer anything, like that's, medic, like that is, specific to, medical personnel. I do have the CROV classes, and those classes, like I can tailor, even having a room full of people, I've got one of my CROV students that's still with me is a police officer, and he's actually one of my CROV black belts.
Yeah.
And when he comes to class now and works, I really focus on stuff with him because he's got the basics when it comes to CROV. I really focus on stuff with him that is pertinent to him being a police officer, because there are, certain things that he can do that as civilians, like we can't in a situation, but there's certain things too that he has to be careful about, because then he gets police brutality screamed at him if he goes, so I can tailor that, when we're working on stuff, I'll be like, okay, here's what we're going to do in your specific situation. It's like as a healthcare person, if you're in the hospital, here's an option that we can work on for you that is going to keep you safe, minimize the chance of injury, or minimize injury to whether it's a patient or a family member, or whatever. And I kind of do that even in my kids' class. What I teach my 10-year-olds and my 15-year-olds, or my 18 or my 25-year-old students. I teach them all the same defense, but it's the mindset.
Right.
As a 18, 20, 25-year-old that's going to be attacked outside of, a bar, or outside of, at the mall, at Walmart, or wherever, I'm going to teach them the same defense, but it's the follow-up. It's what you do after you initially get loose that differs between the kid that's 10 years old and somebody grabs him by the neck at school.
Yeah.
I'm not going to teach them to stomp ankles, knees, and kick the groin, and do all this other stuff, because that's going to be excessive. They're going to get in trouble with the school. My goal is that they can defend themselves at school and not get expelled. If one of my boys defends herself at school and they get expelled, we're going to Gaddy land, as long as they didn't start it. It's a mindset and a realizing that, okay, the setting that I'm in, because what I would do in the hospital is completely opposite of what I would do out and about.
See, but maybe that's something that, since the hospital's not picking up on what you're putting down in writing, maybe that's something that we can see. I have your side hustle. You can do Krav Maga for medical. I mean, I think it would be wildly popular to, like, how do you protect yourself, and make sure that that patient is safe or the family member is minimally harmed, whatever it is. It's a hard spot. I mean, the whole thing's just shitty.
Well, I think that there is an extreme level of ignorance to think that you can go into these social settings and never have any threats of violence taken against you.
And
That is extreme ignorance on the
And
workers' part.
I think that's another part of where our society's at too. People are being conditioned and have been taught that, hey, it's not your job to take care of yourself. It's your job to be
Right.
nice and then call somebody whose job it is. But it's
No.
not. I mean,
No.
that's not the case. It is 100% your job to be able to defend yourself. And coming
Right.
from me as a man, as a father, I'm like, I feel even more of a responsibility, because chances are I'm going to have my two boys with me that are 10 and, 11 years old, that not only am I responsible for myself, I'm responsible for them.
Yeah.
So I think because of my view, that's kind of how I feel when I'm at work. It's like I'm, a lot of times I'm one of the only men working that night. I'm working with a bunch of females who are now coming out of nursing school. We got one nurse that started we got a nurse that just started. She posted on Facebook. She just turned 21 years old.
Mhm.
I mean, I'm 20 years older than she is. So it's like, I feel like, just a male responsibility. Maybe it's that toxic masculinity. Yeah. But it's my job to kind of be the protector of.
I love toxic masculinity.
Jeez. Careful what you ask for, Leslie. But we're gonna wind this down, but I want to add this is that, I have watched people come into areas, like coming in with a presence, right? There is a way that people carry themselves that
100%.
says, you can trust me, or I've got it. I've got control of this situation, of my situation. I'm going to walk in. And when I would do that, even in labor and delivery, they used to call me the laboring patient whisperer, because they were like, how do you always get them in control? You're afraid when you have pain. So if you teach them that in this scenario, it's normalized, and I go through the process and I get the partner with them and I explain all of that, like, I don't have a problem. So I grab control of the situation right from the beginning. And the advice I think we might all have is like, walk in owning it, and walk in having a game plan with your patients. Work with them, collaborate with them, build that trust. And when you do that, we're going to de-escalate a lot of problems right from the beginning. Because as soon as they don't trust you, if we don't understand what's going on, our natural instinct, our brain's going to fill in the gap with its own story. And if that story is a negative one, look out, because that can just keep building. You don't know what's going on in their mind. Know your shit, walk in the room, know what you're going to do, build trust. And when all else fails, call John. We'll give out a cell phone after.
It'll be linked.
That's right. I'm kidding. All right. We got to wrap this up. We got the best picture of the issues and possible solutions, and everybody has to come to table. Everybody has to be accountable. The hospitals, the clinics have to be accountable. The staff members have to be accountable. Patients and families have to be accountable. Y'all got to behave in there. Don't be acting a fool. Everybody's going to be accountable. And so when we're putting that first, I think that's where we're going to see the best improvement overall, right? Just my humble opinion.
I agree.
Yep, 100%.
All right, Leslie, what else?
I think that was a great session. John, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate the training that we have done together, all the real world training that you have taught me. Yes, I will come back. I promise eventually.
Leslie's a Krav Maga girl.
Yeah, well, and then I have all these children that like to do everything under the sun. So that prevents me from training. So
I understand.
So, but yeah, thanks so much for joining us.
Perfect. John, what do you got? Anything?
No, I appreciate you guys, having me on, listening to, my opinions or my so-called expertise. And it really is something. It's like, because I love being a nurse. I love being a nurse practitioner. I obviously love martial arts, being able to help people. And it's for me, it's frustrating, when, we find ourselves in these situations, and it's kind of like you're stuck between a rock and a hard place. People are
Right.
having to choose. Do I defend myself, keep myself safe? Do I, you know, potentially lose my job if I do, so it's like I'd love to be able to find that happy median. But like you said, I think it goes in circles, and it's gonna there's a lot of give and take on everybody's part, and it's a matter of trying to get everybody on the same page, which is, seems almost impossible sometimes. But
Yeah.
it's like I'm always here to offer, ideas and solutions, and potential, fixes, or whatever. But it's just it's an uphill battle at the very least.
You get your Krav Maga for medical going, and let's see how that goes. Like,
All right, I'll work on it.
all right, everybody. This is Bullets to Bedpans. Great, great discussion as always. And we want to hear from you guys. Like what we're putting out, give comments, share your stories. We want to know what you guys are experiencing. Do you guys have solutions? If you got them, share them. We want to know. So we hope you guys have a great rest of the week. And from all of us to all of you, peace out.